This is kind of, again, it's probably going to be an all football show, I think. But we're moving over to the college side. There's a reason it's all football. It's January. This is the biggest month in football. You got the NFL playoffs, and now you've also have the college football playoffs. For the first time, expanded to 12 teams, and it's all culminating. We most recently had on Thursday and Friday the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl, which led to a national championship matchup of Ohio State, which was the 8th seed in the bracket, and Notre Dame, the 7th seed in the bracket. Now, obviously, those aren't kind of perfectly aligned to where they were ranked, given that the whole with Boise State getting a bye and Arizona State getting a bye. But either way, two teams that maybe that have had some setbacks in their season. Ohio State, obviously, the big loss to Michigan on their home field. Notre Dame, even more obviously, the loss to Northern Illinois that kind of shocked them, but they've been able to rebound, and they're here, and one coach is going to be able to vanquish those demons and take home a national championship. So, Simon, I know that we're kind of going to I know you don't watch maybe as much college football, so I'll kind of keep it broad to start. Because one of the big topics of conversation is just the general idea of this 12-team bracket and how that's worked out. And I know some people are mad because Ohio State and Notre Dame in the 4-team bracket probably wouldn't have made it at all. They didn't win their conference. I mean, Notre Dame is independent, but Ohio State didn't win the conference. They didn't even make the conference title game. They lost to a bad Michigan team. Notre Dame lost to a terrible in comparison Northern Illinois team. Those losses would have knocked teams out of the playoff normally, but they have a second chance.
Yeah.
How are you kind of feeling about this expanded playoff field, giving teams a second chance? Do you think that's good for the sport, or are you kind of with the people who are saying, like, no, they probably don't deserve to be here in the first place?
I mean, I like it. I think that it makes a lot of sense. I think it allows for those types of Cinderella runs, right? Because just because you lost to a team that you should have beaten, like early in the year, like a loss in September shouldn't determine what happens. Obviously, now that we're in January, right? That's more my logic.
Yeah.
Of like, the playoffs are the playoffs, right? Like, it's those Cinderella runs that make the playoffs special in most sports, right? It's being able to watch that stuff. Nobody doesn't like an underdog story. So I get it. I get it for the purists who I'm sure are like, yeah, but we want to see the best of the best picked so that we fully just get to see the 4 best teams in college football or whatever. I get that. I get that side of it too. I think for what is best for college football, absolutely. This is the right way to go. I think it allows for teams to actually have a shot at it. Like a lot of, I know last year we were talking about, I think it was, what team was it? There was a team that got completely just like robbed of a spot because their quarterback got hurt. And then
Florida State,
Florida State. Because they just lost their opportunity, not because of anything that happened on the field. They lost it because of basically politics, if you want to look at it like that, right? Which is crappy. It's that type of stuff shouldn't happen. And I think having a wider bracket like this pretty much shuts that down, which is terrific. So I'm totally on the side of I think it makes a ton of sense for me. I know that but I do get it. I get like the people who are trying to say that that they preferred the old system. I understand that because I know that's a big part of college football. Those politics is almost what makes it college football to a certain degree, right? So I mean, I don't know. I get both sides. I am definitely firmly on the side of I like the new system. It makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm very much with you there. And speaking as more of a newer college football fan, I again maybe don't have the perspective of the purists who, I don't know, maybe they want to go back to the time when you just voted the national champion, you didn't even play a game. But I as a casual observer, it's been the most invested I've been in the sport. Even though a lot of these games haven't necessarily been close, it's still been fun to watch, and like you said, hope for some of these upsets. Like even in the first round where the underdogs all kind of got blown out of the water, it was still fun to watch. And even though all of those games were kind of trash, the one game that was great, the Texas-Arizona State game, where underdog Arizona State had a big comeback, forced it to overtime, that was one of the better football games I've seen this year or in the past couple of years. It was fantastic. So it does create those kind of moments for you. And to your point about like the controversy and the politics around it, I think this kind of creates the best of both worlds, because you still have arguments about which teams need to make it in and which teams should get left out. That I think is the fun of it. But you also don't have teams like Florida State being like, how could we literally have done anything different? We won all of our games.
Exactly.
You don't necessarily have that anymore. Like the debate this year was SMU versus Alabama, who gets the last spot. And when Alabama was eventually the odd one out, they can't necessarily complain because they lost 3 games, some of which to not very good teams. And in college football, that's kind of too far past your margin of error. So yeah, I think that's definitely I think it's created a more interesting playoff, and it's also given these Ohio State and Notre Dame teams more momentum going into it and more excitement building up, where you've had these good wins, and now going into this national championship, it almost feels like more is at stake. Aside from like when this would happen in the past, I guess you have your semifinal game, but it does feel kind of abrupt to be like your season ends and then you wait a couple weeks and then you keep going. So yeah, I'm definitely with you that I've liked this new system. But we can kind of get to the more specifics of the game. I don't know I think the line is pretty crazy in terms of Ohio State being favored by quite a bit. Ohio State is currently an 8.5-point favorite, which in the national championship game is a pretty big spread. I think the big difference here is that I think Notre Dame's defense is pretty good, but their offense has kind of been, at least in the games I watched, it's kind of been slow going. It's been a lot of like against Georgia, for example, their Riley Leonard passed for 90 yards and still somehow won. So I think that's kind of what I'm looking for. I know you haven't necessarily watched to the same extent, but for a team like Notre Dame that's kind of more heavy on the defense and has more relies on their running game, doesn't necessarily have a passing game, is there a way to win, you think, against a stronger Ohio State team?
I think there absolutely is. I think any team with a strong defense is going to have a shot at it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be tough for them. Obviously, Ohio State has a pretty incredible offense. It's a big reason they got there. But with the defense that Notre Dame has, I think they're always going to have a shot. I think that's going to be the big thing. I don't think you should be putting the house on Ohio State just because you don't think that Leonard can pass a ball good. He's here. He was able to lead his team here. There's a big reason that he's in this starting spot in the national championship. I think you never know. I think it's just going to be a matter of who can light the lamp. I don't know. I don't know. I think that writing out Notre Dame just because you don't think their offense is good enough to get it done is not giving their defense enough credit. I think there's always going to be a possibility.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. I think even in the Texas game, I think we were kind of shown that there's a blueprint to beat this Ohio State team through defense, where Texas kind of had some lapses, but really their Ohio State's offense was held in check, aside from a couple big plays where you had Travion Henderson 75-yard screen pass, and then the Jack Sawyer return for a touchdown. Other than those couple big plays, Texas was kind of able to hold Ohio State in check, and that all starts with containing Jeremiah Smith. And I think if Notre Dame can manage to cover what has ultimately been Ohio State's best receiver by far, their offense kind of seems to falter without him. And we saw that against Oregon, where when the Ducks didn't really have an answer for Jeremiah Smith, I think he put up like close to 200 yards on the game on their asses, and that's why Oregon lost by like 20 points. So there's absolutely, I think, a chance for Ohio State, but it is definitely going to be tough. And I think if Notre Dame has a chance to win, they have to make it into their type of game, which they've done successfully against Georgia and against Penn State, where it was until maybe the last quarter of that Penn State game, you make it into a defensive game where you say, like, okay, it's going to be a slog to get points, and you're going to have to fight for every inch. And that's when the Fighting Irish kind of come in, and they'll say, like, we're going to grind you, and we may not be successful on every drive, but Riley Leonard's going to make a play with his legs when he needs to. We have a good running back tandem in Jeremiah Love. And the other running back's name is escaping me, but he's also very, very good. So I think that's kind of the key. I think if you can kind of shut down Ohio State's explosiveness and not turn it into a track meet, like their first two playoff games were, and you kind of have to limit their offense, I think that's kind of the key to victory for Notre Dame here. But there's a reason Ohio State is so heavily favorited, because they can track meet people, and they do have explosiveness, and they also have a very good defense to back it up. I think this will be an interesting matchup, because it's two big name brand schools. They obviously both have a lot of momentum coming in with how they have gotten here. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I don't love that it's played on a Monday. That kind of sucks. It's like for me in Vancouver, it's like Monday at 4:30. And so I have to like watch it on my commute home. That's kind of not fun, but
yeah, that's not the best.
Yeah. Do you think you'll be able to get around to watching this one, Simon?
I'm sure I'll give a shot at it. If I've got time. I don't know what I'm doing in the evening, so if I've got time, I'm sure I'll watch it. But for me, I think I agree with you. I think it's a terrific matchup. I think it's any time that you get to watch the type of game where it's one terrific defense taking on a terrific offense, that's where the best stories are made, obviously, right? I don't know. I totally understand why Ohio State's the favorite. I think anytime in any sort of game where it's a very strong defense against offense is usually going to be the favorite. It's more explosive. It's more flashy. It's fun. But I don't know. I think it'd be really fun to see this Notre Dame team kind of surprise people. Who knows what's going to end up happening? But yeah, I'm sure I'll try and tune in.
Yeah. And to kind of wrap it up, because I mean, again, we will, before everybody kind of goes to the comment section, like we are both admittedly kind of more casual college football fans. But I think I can speak speaking for myself at least too. I know it's definitely something I've gotten more into in the last couple of years, and I'm kind of gaining up my familiarity with it. I'll kind of end by just asking you, Simon, is there anything that college football can do in, like, whether it be in this game or just in the next couple of years, that will make you more of a college football fan and make you want to tune into games more?
If college football can add more hours to the day so that I have time to watch it, then I might be able to become a college football fan.
That's so valid.
That's probably the biggest thing that they can do. That is the
eternal struggle. That is the eternal struggle.
That would probably be my answer for most sports that people are telling me that honestly, I should be watching. Yeah. I mean,
who knows? Yeah. If they created the expanded 12-team playoff, they can do anything.
Yeah, you know what? That's true. That's definitely true. Let's add another hour to the day, lads. So that some asshole in Canada can catch the game.
The College Football Playoff Committee announces a new 25-hour days.
Yeah, for everybody
to be introduced
on
worldwide.
Yeah. So that you can catch the college football game. It's gonna be sick. I mean, as to give like an actual real answer, I wouldn't be against getting into college football, but the big thing for me is absolutely just time, and also just like, I mean, you were able to, obviously you've gotten into college football in the last little bit, avoiding this issue, but me and you are in Canada. There isn't really that same like, it's not like I can go, hey, I go to Alabama, I'm gonna go to an Alabama game, right? Like that's not there, right? Like it's not the same in Canada. Yeah. Like that football culture does not come up here. Like It's just not the same. Like it's there for them. It's football. For us, it's hockey. Hockey down there isn't as big. Football up here isn't as big, and that's just kind of how it is. But I don't know. I think that I could get into it, but the hard part for me is just getting invested with a team that is thousands of miles away from where I am.
Yeah. No, and I'd agree with you. And I think a big part of the reason I got into it was because I was able to have that in-person experience
Yeah.
of seeing a team. When I went to go see a Huskies game, and my first ever college football game, and obviously that was last year, so they were a very good team, and that was a very probably the perfect place to jump on a bandwagon and kind of get into the sport was last year's Washington Huskies team.
Yeah.
And that kind of magical season they had. So that definitely helped. And I definitely agree. It even like as a kid when I was growing up, I never really understood why it was quite as big as the NFL. And I would always try to get attached to a team. And then I would be like, why do I care?
In the US, I totally get it. Because
Yeah,
especially
you have
for
an
those,
allegiance to it.
oh, absolutely. Like it's the same sense that me and you might feel towards like for you it's UBC, for me it's U of C, right? Like it's the same type of thing with that. It's just the difference in culture, right? Because college sports
Yes.
in Canada is just not it's not the same. Like nowhere
No.
near. Like people still go to the games and all that, but it's just not the same fucking thing. Like I don't know. I nearly had the chance to go and catch. It's not NCAA like top tier. No, it wouldn't be the same as your experience at Washington. I had the opportunity earlier this year to. I got invited to go to a Montana Grizzlies football game, and I ended up turning it down because I didn't have time. But but I regretted it because I heard all the stories afterwards, and it sounded like an incredible experience. And obviously, you're barely going for the game, you're going for the atmosphere, right? Like that's the whole argument with it.
Yeah.
But and it's just not the same here. Like I'd argue that the only kind of similar thing is, and it's this sport is not really that big in Canada. You'd think it would be bigger considering it's our national sport. But if you're going to a sport for atmosphere, I'd say lacrosse is probably the best one to go for in Canada. I don't know if you've ever been to a lacrosse game, Caleb, but like a Roughnecks game or something like that, that's probably the best atmosphere you're going to find in Canada, in my opinion, because you just don't have the same thing. Football's just not as big here. You don't get as many people that big on it. That or a playoff hockey game, I guess. That's up there too.
I was gonna say I think that would probably trump it for me as someone who's gone to both. But
Yeah. It's pretty even for me. I went to a playoff lacrosse game. So
Okay.
I think it was pretty cool. It was a cool experience. I think they're both pretty close.
No.
I mean, a lot of people obviously playoff hockey games are pretty nuts as well. But
I think that's pretty hard to beat.
yes,
But I will say I do think the other thing that college football can do is I think when they continue to up the stakes, and they've done that with these playoffs and put these teams on a pedestal to where say like, hey, these are the best games, and like tune into these. I think that also helps.
yes,
Because I think my other issue with college football is there's 100 and whatever teams, and it's so hard to keep track of everything as a casual fan who's
that's
coming in
also
and
a
doesn't
big
really
thing
know.
that
Where
keeps
it's
me
like,
away from it.
it's like because like okay, we've got the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, the Pac-12. No, doesn't exist anymore. But then you've also got these other conferences that are in the same league, but they don't matter as much. So you've got the American Conference, and you've also got like the Sun Belt, and at a certain point, it just gets to be like I have no idea what's happening anymore. So I think the idea of having a playoff can also bring in more casual fans because it's a much more familiar system to say like these are more or less the 12 best teams, and we kind of can see how that plays out, and it's a lot easier to focus on a certain matchup or a certain kind of storyline throughout, and then once you kind of get into that, it's easier to kind of expand from there.
Yep.
I think also call it the college football 25 also helps with that.
Oh, absolutely.
As a sidebar.
No, that's the only reason I know fucking anything. But
yeah.
I am that Jets like guy making trade decisions off of Madden ratings. That's literally me. But yeah, no, it should be an interesting game. I honestly, the more we've talked about it, the more I want to tune in and watch it. I think it's I don't know. There's a lot of storylines around it that I think are very interesting. I think, like I said, anytime it's a high-powered offense taking on a defense that has obviously shut down a lot of terrific teams, it's always going to be a good game. Those are the type of games that are always super interesting, and it really does just show two polar opposite sides of the sport that obviously both are a way to win, but which one's better, right? So I think
Yeah.
it'll be fun. I think it'll be fun. I think I like I said, I think as for like a lot of people not liking the fact that it was done under this new system, both of these teams probably wouldn't have gotten here in the old one, but I think that's half the fun of it. Maybe instead of
Yep.
taking that as a sign of this system doesn't work, maybe that just shows how much the old system didn't work. Because if we
Yeah.
have the two best teams who obviously won their way here now, uh, I don't know. Like I think that's probably more, in my opinion, that's probably more what that means.
Me too. It's real football. It's like everybody said this season, where it's like a lot of the teams who are complaining are undefeated in hypothetical matchups, but that's not what this is about anymore.
Yeah,
This is
no, absolutely.
about real matchups, and both Ohio State and Notre Dame have played their way through and deserve their chance to be here. And for the first time in college football in a while, there's really no doubt in that these two teams deserve to be here, in my opinion, at least.
Yep. No, I don't disagree with that at all.